So I'm a little excited about this video because I haven't necessarily done one like this before. In this particular video, we're going to look at this 6750 XT plus 5800X 3D build that costs around $800 and something dollars. Depending on how you want to go ahead and build it, I've left a list of the components, the prices that I recommended, and some of the, different benefits that you can actually see as a response to a content creator saying that you cannot get PS5 Pro performance for that price point. Now, this is not a matter of trying to own somebody. There is no competition here. A gaming PC is a better machine, a more flexible machine, and gives you much more options. However, there are a lot of people who are interested that are listening to these conversations. When they hear things like that, or some of the things that maybe go along the lines of, you need about $2,000 to match the PS5 Pro, you need $1,500, all of this talk, we have to ensure that we ask ourselves, is this true, or is somebody actually saying something that they probably don't know anything about? Hence, the parts and the components here, and the thing basically itself running some of these benchmarks and running some of these games entirely. And I say benchmarks because we're going to look at Red Dead Redemption 2, and that one has an internal benchmark that's used across the board. Now, an audience member was talking about this build, and they said, this build that's actually being spoken about here is not even, mentioning anything about native 4K. And I think there's also the other misconception that goes around the, block, where some folk on console believe that they're playing their games in native 4K, which is actually quite shocking that people actually do believe this, because the consoles themselves, nor the console manufacturers, actually claim that they can always do 4K. If you read the box of your Xbox Series X, I own one, or if you read the box of your PS5, you're going to see the 4K conversation with a caveat, which talks about software that actually does support that kind of performance. So without the game supporting it, basically the optimization and the options that the developers give you, you're not going to see that particular kind of performance. Hence, what consoles have enjoyed is dynamic resolution scaling, and now other kinds of scaling and, picture and, video quality options that allow for these games to run at higher resolution, but, in higher resolution and lower resolution, and even upscaling lower resolutions to higher upscaled resolutions, so that the user can basically maintain a perceived resolution at maybe in some cases 4K or 1440. However, the native side of things is a whole different story. And this is what we're going to look at, because an audience member said something about this PC probably not being able to run, games native 4K. So we kick off with Gotham Knights. Gotham Knights at native 4K, I did a number of settings and so on and so forth. What I'll do is I'll upload the raw videos and leave the links in the description for you, so you can go and see all of the settings that were changed. I went with medium settings at one point, low settings, high settings, and this entire build was very surprisingly quite good for a bottlenecked build, because the 5800X 3D can push over 100 frames on this particular game, but the 6750 XT could not go any further at 4K than around maybe 40 to 50 something FPS, depending on the setting that I used. So when I went through the settings all the way through low, I was able to get, 50-ish, 55 FPS, and that kind of stayed consistent. The frame time is also another important piece. If you notice, the frame time of this game was also kind of jittery all over the place, but I was quite surprised because I was not even expecting it. I've never actually run this GPU at 4K. If I would do 4K in this game, I'd start off with like the 6800 XT, and then you can see over here, the game kind of had that little, texture modification. When I hit those NPCs with the cryogenic effect, the game had to compile those shaders really quick in real time. But then you can basically see that, a lot of the, game's frame rate basically stayed cool. And the texture and the details were actually decent. I was looking at it going, wow. I guess a lot of the lighting is actually very, very well done in this game. I know when Digital Foundry did their first impression, they were like not so, impressed, but they did talk about the, texture detail and stuff that the game does have. Now, the video footage is, minutes and minutes long. I did a lot of changes in terms of, and I'm just going to go ahead and, scrub through it because, like I said, I'm going to leave the raw footage for you so you'll see all the changes that were made. And I did use TAA Gen 5 as the NT-A-list. I usually use TAA Gen 4 to get a lot of my results when I did and have done Gotham Knights benchmarks. But using Gen 5 was what the system automatically suggested. So I said, why not just go with it? Because again, you don't have to do your settings in, your games. Your game can actually automatically detect your hardware and actually give you a reference points to go from. And then you can go ahead and scale as much or as little as you like. And you can pretty much see what the benefits are. At some point, though, I decided, because the reality is this is a 1440p card, to go ahead and tweak the entire system to 1440p. And behold, it wasn't even a question. When the thing is playing in its own, environment, or I guess in its own capacity, which is 1440, it's not even, it's comedy at that point. The thing goes as high as 60 FPS if you lock it there, or even much higher. And I like Gotham Knights because Gotham Knights, its options gives you a lot of, different parameters that you can tweak. You can lock your FPS, you can do all kinds of stuff. So I put it at 1440 indoors in this particular area. Got to fight some bad guys, and I think I went all the way as high settings, and yeah, just did 60 FPS without any problems. Now, for the PS5 Pro, this game has not been unlocked past 30 FPS, even on the PS5. Can they do 60 FPS at 1440? It's unknown, but again, this $800 and something PC has a benefit that the console doesn't have. The developers basically put you at their mercy if they're willing to do a particular change in terms of upping the FPS or unlocking the FPS for you. Whereas, on PC, nobody has to wait for that. And if the game is optimized, your hardware is going to basically go ahead and do exactly what it's supposed to do. So indoors, I noticed Gotham Knights is favored in terms of its performance, but went outside, did a little bit of jumping around and hopping around with Robin, and I got myself the 16.6 milliseconds that I actually did once to go ahead and implement. Now, let's move on to Red Dead Redemption 2. Red Dead Redemption 2 is an interesting game overall. Now, believe you me, the Gotham Knights footage that you saw actually was hamstrung by the fact that I captured the footage on the exact same PC that I was playing on. I did the same thing for Red Dead Redemption, and what I know from a lot of the other people who do benchmarks is when you're benchmarking, you want to use a separate PC. But Elgato and their 4K capture card is trash. So I was forced to capture the footage on the default machine and bring it to you. So that was my option. Hence, I lose 3 FPS on the data. That's the delta that I think is a conservative data set. And I was able to investigate using Red Dead Redemption 2 to be able to figure that out. So on doing the benchmarks, which are available within the game, which is nice because you don't have to worry about anything. You just hit it and the benchmark starts to go. I was able to go ahead and average, while capturing the footage, 57 FPS at 4K native. If you want to go back and look at the settings, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and leave all of the footage for you guys. You should be able to go ahead and see all of this in terms of what the resolution and such actually is. And this is running at 4K. I think I had to go ahead and restart the recording just so I think when I changed when I changed the video settings, I had to re-record and everything. But again, you can see I'll give you that small clip of the footage and whatever it is, and you'll be able to see it yourself. Or if you want to go ahead and count the pixels, by all means, knock yourself out. That's probably going to help me if you want to go ahead and verify that. But again, on running into this particular scene here, there's a very, very demanding scene on the first recording, which is this one where, I think it's Arthur Morgan. I haven't beaten this game. I haven't played it past like the first hour. He's running through this marketplace, and so you see some interesting frame rate dips here. I think this is as a result of the load that is on the GPU itself. The GPU utilization is on like 96%. I mean, the 1500X3D is pushing this GPU into oblivion, like it's pushing it to the wall. And so I get to see all of what it is that, your money is actually paying for when you buy a GPU like this. And so by the time you get here and finish the benchmarks, you notice that this is actually 57.67 FPS in terms of its max. I ran the benchmark again without actually recording and capturing, and I was able to get 60 point. I took a picture of it on my phone. Hold on, guys. Let me pull it out for you here in real time, because I'm also going to go ahead and post these results so that everybody has access to them if they actually need it. Here we go. What was the FPS that I got? I got 60.3497 average FPS. So Red Dead Redemption 2 runs at 4K 60 FPS on this build if you want to do it that way. You're probably going to see some dips here and there, but again, on the PlayStation 5 Pro, what is the FPS that Red Dead Redemption 2 runs at? I thought so. They haven't done anything. You're at the mercy of the developers. Then I went to a classic game, good game, a good PC game, and a good console game as well too. But again, still a game that is hamstrung by the developers not having moved an inch. And this is one of, a version of this developer anyways, is my favorite developer ever. I went to play Batman Arkham Knight. Yes, this is a classic game. We're all gamers. I know, and I see a lot of, CPU and GPU benchmarks, and a lot of times they ignore a lot of games that are old. Now, I think it's basically to go ahead and say if a GPU or if a hardware SKU can catch up with the modern titles and such, that's probably why they do that. But as a gamer, a lot of people are going to come to PC and play games that they enjoyed on console. So this is what you should expect. This game is so well optimized, only requires about 4 to 5. I haven't seen anything more than about 4.7 or so gigs of VRAM for usage. So at 1440, the game has 3 FPS settings, 30, 60, and 90. You can unlock the FPS, but what I've noticed is there's a sweet spot. So I didn't unlock the FPS. This is just all traditional in terms of the game itself. And I was able to go in and run the game while capturing the footage with the exact same build. So my FPS varied anywhere from about 50-something, 57, high 50s to 60, high 60 FPS. So my guess is I would have averaged 60 FPS, but I can also verify by checking the AMD software as well to go ahead and see what my average FPS was. But my FPS was not a problem. At 4K, this PC was basically killing it. I mean, look at the GPU utilization. If you can see it, is a little, the text is kind of small. Let me go ahead and see if I can zoom it up for you guys here. But GPU utilization has not dipped lower than 97% on all these games so far. And it was just a jolly experience at the end of the day. This is just like regular PC stuff. And this could have been done. This also can be done with old hardware. But it's nice to basically see that you have access to a version of the game that even newer consoles don't have access to. And so here we are playing these games now, in many cases at 4K, and you can play them at 60 or more FPS depending on how you actually set up your build, or if you're not capturing any footage. I mean, well, I was surprised in some places where I was actually hitting like 70 FPS at 4K. But again, the CPU that we're using is kind of beefy, to be honest. It's an overkill CPU for this build. But again, I bought this CPU just simply because I just wanted it. I could have gotten the 5700X to basically balance things out, but still it stayed within a very interesting price point at about $880. So why not? I mean, you feel me? So that's some of the, things that I went ahead to consider at the end of the day. The final game that I actually did go ahead and put out here is a game that I also play a lot of. So again, I did this benchmark from my own perspective, knowing and understanding the hardware that I wanted to use, knowing and understanding exactly what it is that I was interested in playing and how that would also resonate, because everyone's going to have a different, need and different set of, needs when they're building their PC. What kind of games do they play? If I was a CSGO player, I'd build this build slightly differently. You figure what I mean? If I like FPSs, I would build this build slightly differently. But I like playing the third-person action games. I like some textures, not too much to me. I just like more game mechanics anyways. But it's nice to get some textures and lighting. I don't care about ray tracing, so I'll build AMD and all that. So these are some things that you must consider as you're doing this. But let's jump into Tom Clancy's The Division 2. One of my favorite games. I have an entire YouTube channel about this game. And I was able to go ahead and test this game out. And behold, I think I was able to, lock this game in at high settings. And I was able to maintain somewhere close to 60 FPS, open world, a lot of, VFX and such. You could even see like some of the textures having to compile here in real time. This game was made in 2019 with AMD in mind. And what's crazy is AMD's hardware has evolved drastically from a lot of what, it was expected to be doing back then. I think I ran the game at Ultra at one point and I was getting like 40 something FPS, and then I went ahead and I think I did some modifications and changed it to high or whatnot. I think I put it on high and whatever. And so I was able to basically lock in about 50 something FPS at 4K native. Again, no upscaling, no dynamic resolution that I know of, except maybe Massive put it in the PC version and I don't know. But again, the question was about 4K and how the game is going to behave. And once again, GPU utilization, oh baby, this CPU did not let this GPU act out. Didn't even give it any room. I'm seeing some 99% GPU utilization markers actually show up here. Yeah, it's weird. Look, this is another Division footage that I actually took, but this is on the exact same build, which is weird. Anyways, this is the benchmark footage for you anyways while capturing the footage and, all that stuff. So I'll take my 3 FPS and say that my average was 60 FPS here because that's exactly what you got to look at. The delta is actually 5 from a much less conservative perspective, but I'm doing 3 so that you can keep 2 at the end of the day. So what do we learn here? What is the, lesson that we've learned? Is this just hey, look at my FPS, guys, or whatever it is? No. The question that was asked was, can you actually accomplish what the PS5 Pro can accomplish within the $800 price point? The answer is simply, you can actually do way better than it and keep the options in terms of flexibility, access to games at better performance that the consoles don't have access to because of the red tape. The developers don't want to go and, hop over to get you better performance in many cases, or maybe they want to monetize it by making you a retextured remaster down the road. I don't know. And then there are also other benefits in terms of flexibility, being able to swap components. If there's something that is not to your liking, or maybe say price is out of your range, you have the option to basically leverage other components, other substitutes that can do the job. For instance, I mentioned that you can change the 5800X 3D to a 5800X, of which if you say, okay, what does a 5800X versus the PlayStation 5 CPU look like? If you go to some of these benchmark websites that do stuff like this, you'll notice that there seems to be a 40-ish, at some point 30% discrepancy in terms of capability in many, applications and uses. So you can already tell that the 5700X is a stronger, CPU. If you wanted to maybe do the 5800X 3D, which is what's in this build, it's pretty much over 50% in terms of some of the differential. And it's a bloodbath. In some cases, you'll see some single and multi-core applications that show some closeness, and in some places you just don't have those applications to even be able to go ahead and test at the end of the day, because the multi-core applications and such don't even exist on PC. I'm looking forward to more developers doing multi-core development. There have not been many who have actually leveraged that. The last developer I heard actually say something about that was back in the Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor days in a GDC talk. Since then, I haven't heard many developers actually emphasize it, or maybe they do it. Maybe they do multi-threading in their coding and such, and we just don't know, and they don't bog us down with those details. But I think this was a very fun experiment to try out at this point and show that the statements about $1,500, $1,000, $2,000 PCs to match a console is absurd, and it needs to be done. It needs to stop. At some point, everybody needs to understand that your platform of choice is based on your choice. It doesn't have to come out here and start to try to make itself seem more superior than the platform on which the games themselves are made on. It's just weird to me at the end of the day. So thanks for watching the video. Appreciate you guys' time and audience. Look in the description. I will have the footage posted for you to go ahead and watch all the gameplay, raw footage. You'll see it all yourselves. Thanks again. Peace out.